Welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King. I am very, 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 very happy today to be joined for the first time since the Birmingham Bowl, since whenever we previewed that game against Houston. It is a football preview roundtable with the entire crew. Philip Marshall, Mark Murphy, and Jason Caldwell, the roundtable, is back together to talk about Auburn's season opening game against Mercer Saturday night inside Jordan-Hare Stadium, 6 p.m. on ESPN, 6 p.m. Central, by the way, on ESPN Plus. So if you haven't figured out your ESPN Plus free trial yet, you probably need to do that here in the next couple days. I don't know if that's something they have right now, but figure out a way to watch this one. But anyway, guys, so we were talking about it before we started. It's always this time of year, especially when you're not opening like Auburn has with like an Oregon or a Washington or something. We've wrung this thing dry previewing this Auburn team. We've talked about pretty much every aspect of Auburn's roster as we could have. The quarterback battle, we know what we're going to see on Saturday, the depth chart, all that kind of stuff. They finally have an opponent to go against, but not a ton of data on Mercer. Obviously, it's an FCS team, but we have more data than we usually would because they've already played a game, Jason. They handled Morehead State last week, 63-13. As I was looking at it, a ton of offensive records for them set in that game. I believe Ty James is the name of the former Georgia player who's the receiver. He was the FCS Offensive Player of the Week.
Yep.
So we were talking about this a couple episodes ago, but if San Jose State next week represents maybe a slight test for this Auburn offense because they have a decent defense in the Mountain West, decent front seven. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a team that'll spread you out. They've got good receivers, got an experienced quarterback. Auburn might have some frustrations on defense every once relative to this opponent, relative to what will probably be a big win. I think Mercer could do some decent things, and they'll see some what actually could be a nice test here in this first game.
Yeah, I think from a skill player perspective, this is a team that might be able to cause you a few issues. Like you said, Ty James, the guy that signed at Georgia, 6'2", 200. I mean, monster game coming out. Devron Harper's a speed guy that originally played at Gardner-Webb, had a 93-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. The guy I really like in this is Austin Douglas, running back, is 5'11", 205. Him and Al Wooten, a 6'2", 225 back. They got two power backs that can do some things. Fred Payton, the quarterback, was at Coastal Carolina before. I mean, they got some guys that have played up a little bit. He's 6'2", 220, pretty athletic. The issue I have and the question I have about them is just their lack of size on the offensive line. This is a much bigger Auburn defensive front. Even if you're playing, the two edge guys together, this is still a pretty big defensive line group. And you look at Mercer on the offensive line, Santo DeFranco at left tackle, 6'4", 275. The left guard, 6'3", 285. Your center, 6', 270. Your right guard is 6'2", 250. Your right tackle is the monster of the group at 6'3", 300. They do have a 6'7", 315 redshirt junior that could get in the game, a little bit of South Alabama transfer, but that's really small for a group that you're asking to go against what may be the strength of this Auburn team in terms of the size and depth. It's going to be really hard for me to see them doing a ton, and they want to run the football. I think it's an interesting matchup for this Auburn defense. The question is, this is a Mercer defense that has a little bit of size. They actually played Alabama fairly decent last year. They only gave up 424 yards of total offense to Alabama last year. Now, they gave up 48 points, but one of those was a block punt for a touchdown. Another one came after an interception, a short field. And so you look at them, they got a few players on this defensive front that might be able to cause you some issues. But in the end, this one comes back to if you're Auburn and you have some issues in this game, then that's going to be troubling because this is an opponent that you should be able to handle. But we've seen it before. It happens, and it's not out of the question that it could happen again on Saturday night.
Mark, what do you expect from an offensive game plan for Auburn? There's so many different factors that which by the way, Harsin said today that Eric Keesaw will be the play caller, but you know, in this current stage of things for Auburn and for a lot of teams in college football, that doesn't end up being the biggest of deals, especially when it's something like Auburn where everybody's kind of putting their heads together in terms of game planning and on game days. But just what kind of offensive game plan do you think we'll see in this game? You've got to consider you're breaking in a new quarterback. You've got to consider the new center. Maybe you try to run the ball a little more. You've got a lot of receivers. You want to figure out how good that rotation is, who your best players are. A lot of factors at play. What do you expect to see out of them for the majority of this game?
I think a lot of it depends, Nathan, on how Mercer's going to come out and play defensively, what kind of fronts, what kind of secondary looks, and they'll try to find some matchups they like. But I think it's important to get a rhythm for the quarterback because last year, most of the time, TJ Finley just didn't look smooth. He didn't look comfortable. He didn't have his feet set sometimes when he threw the football. So watch that. And you want to see how the offensive line plays in unison. Really good offensive lines work together. They got a new guy at center, Tay Johnson. He didn't even play at all last year. He's played one game at Auburn. How he fits in with this other group, which is really pretty veteran, is going to be something I'm going to watch. And, without a doubt, you want to see the receivers step up and play better because I thought they were the weakest link on the whole team last year as far as blocking, as far as catching passes, as far as running routes. And I think they're going to be better. I'm curious to see how much better. And I think TJ Finley is going to throw a lot of balls their direction. So that will certainly be what I'm going to be watching Saturday night.
Philip, this is the first time Auburn is opening the season with an FCS opponent since 1999. They played App State.
Should have lost.
Kind of hung around in that game, barely won that one. And, it's kind of set the tone for the last little while for Auburn against non-Power 5 teams. Obviously, they're like anybody. Most of the time, they handle business. Been a few scares here and there. Of course, as recently as Georgia State last season, even the last time they played Mercer, it was a one-score game late in the fourth quarter. I think I remember Mercer scored to make it 17-10 with like 4 minutes left, and then Auburn and Cam Petway put it away toward the end. Of course, Auburn had 5 turnovers in that game, so they just sort of were handing opportunity after opportunity. But this is something where I think if you're Auburn, you are remembering back to Georgia State last season and knowing that with this current iteration of the team and in years past, I think most Auburn fans go into these kinds of games saying this is what should happen. But occasionally, this is what does happen. They kind of trip up. What do they have to do on Saturday in order to make this a decisive win?
My honest opinion, maybe a little different, is that as long as they win, it doesn't much matter. That App State game you talked about 2 weeks after that, they won 41-7 in Baton Rouge. So I think that. Obviously, losing a game like this would be a disaster. Auburn has never lost to an FCS team. Maurice Robinson saved Tommy Tuberville in his first game against App State, which would have been terribly embarrassing since they were supposed to play Florida State in that game, and a very controversial move canceled that game and scheduled Appalachian State instead. And be clear, Appalachian State then was nothing like Appalachian State now. And it was a tie game late in the fourth quarter, and there was a mix-up. The center snapped the ball. Ben Leard wasn't looking for it, and the ball's bouncing around inside the 5-yard line. And Travaris Robinson, who was then a freshman wide receiver, saw it and outran about 4 Mercer guys to the ball and recovered it, and Auburn punted and then got the ball back, and Ben Leard threw a touchdown pass to Ronnie Daniels to win it. But Auburn could easily have lost it. Clearly, they could have lost with Jacksonville State in 2015. Probably should have. Had to go to overtime. So it could happen, but I think it's less like when you play that Auburn team just wasn't really very good. And but there's a little more excitement playing anybody when it's the first game. than if you play in the third game or the fourth game and it's just a game you got to get through. But I don't see Mercer unless Auburn does like they did it in that game you're talking about last time they played and turns it over half of their possessions. I don't see Mercer being able to keep them from running the ball, and I don't see Mercer being able to run the ball very much. And so I'll be surprised if it's close. That doesn't mean, and last year, first two games last year, what was it, 60-10 and 62-0?
Yep.
So and that's why I say it doesn't. I think you make a mistake if you put too much on what you see in a game like this. Either way, and but I think that Mercer is a good FCS team, and the last thing you want to do is mess up and turn the ball over and give them the feeling that, hey, maybe we can do this. Because I've listened to their coach do an interview earlier, and he was approaching it the right way. So we're going to compete and we're going to play as hard as we can. But there was no, we think we can go in there and win the game. He didn't say that. And they can't unless Auburn really helps them a lot. But I think it's important for TJ Finley to be comfortable and have a good game, and for the two coordinators to kind of, it's kind of a shakedown cruise for them too. So it's going to be interesting to watch some of those things. I'll be surprised if Auburn doesn't win. I can't see it being a game, the fourth quarter game or anything like that. Again, unless there's like a ton of turnovers again.
Jason, like Philip mentioned, and also, by the way, to your point, Philip, they almost lost to Georgia State, and then they immediately turned around and, similar for the first time since 1999, since that game, they went and won in Baton Rouge. And so,
right,
you just got to get through it.
And Georgia State has some players now. Georgia State was, they're going to have talent at Georgia State just because of where they are, and plus they're FBS school, so they got more scholarships. But you had to be impressed if you watched Mercer, which I did last week until it just got so ridiculous. It was too boring. And, but I think that, Morehouse, there's a wide range of FCS teams, and Morehouse is not a good one. And Mercer, I think, is a good one. I think they're ranked in the top 25, and, they lost a close game in the last game last season that kept them to I think, East Tennessee State, that kept them from winning their conference and I guess going to the playoffs. So who knows? But this is a game for your Mercer. You want to enjoy the experience and give a good account of yourself. And if you're Auburn, you want to come out feeling good about yourself. The last thing you want is to come out and say, well, of course, the last thing you want is to lose. But beyond that, the last thing you want is to come out saying, man, we won, but we weren't very good. And so you want to have some momentum, because I believe next week will be a much, much tougher test than this week will be.
Yeah, I believe I saw number 14 for them in the FCS rankings after that first game. So top 15 team on their level. Jason, like Philip mentioned, 122-10 was the combined score of those first two games last season. It was a completely identical setup, FCS team and a smaller team before you played Penn State. I remember being pretty impressed with the execution level from this offense against Akron. Now, it might have been you. I can't remember who I was venting to in the press box, but Akron's defense was frustratingly bad. Like, it was
terrible. Yes,
it was almost making me angry how. I think it was you talking about being down the field. Yeah, they were really, really bad. But Mercer could be the same way in a lot of instances. Harsin was asked about it this week. Somebody asked him, was it by design to run for so many yards against those teams last year? And do you plan to lean so much on the rushing attack? And he said, well, how many rushing yards we have between the two games? Like 700. He's like, I mean, sure, yeah, that was by design, of course. Like you always want to have that many rushing yards. But the bottom line is they executed really well out of the gates last year. They were implementing a lot of new offensive stuff for Bo Nix and that offense, and they hit on it pretty well in what was maybe kind of a glorified, exhibition kind of game. But I think it would do a lot, like Philip mentioned. Maybe it would be even more important for a guy like Finley to be as effective. If he ends up being 9 of 12 for $150, something like that, and he's able to go out and run this offense, not only does that make him confident, but it sort of eases some worries that Auburn fans might have, saying, okay, it looks like he can run this offense, and he can be a confident quarterback.
Yeah, and to touch on Philip's point, I completely agree in one situation. I completely agree that if you go out and win 60-0, that it doesn't really. Well, last year showed it's not a barometer, but it can be a barometer if you don't play well. That 99 team had a losing record, even though they did beat LSU. They had a losing record. That team that almost lost to Jacksonville State went 6-6 and had to have a Birmingham Bowl win over Memphis to have a winning record. So it has an impact, because if you're struggling in that game, that means you're not physically dominating the other opponent, or there's a reason why. And so I think that's the thing. I don't think, if it goes great, then you go, okay, that's great. We'll see what the future holds. If there's some issues and you're scuffling, then that's not a great sign in week number one. And quarterback's going to be there, running game's going to be there. I think we feel like we know what we're getting from this defense. There may be a few bumps along the way, but what these guys on defense have gone out there and done it, and they've proven it. The question lies on offense. You're right? Can TJ Finley play and deliver the ball and do those things? But can they? I mean, they better be able to run it against Miss Mercer. There's no question about that. And then, can they make some plays at wide receiver? Not can they catch the ball? That was basically the end of the year last year. That was they just catch the ball. That was the goal. You got to do more than that, and they got to do more than just catch the football and get tackled after 8 yards. You got to be more explosive than that at wide receiver, and that's the next step. They got to show some of those things. You don't have to do a bunch of those things against Mercer in week one, but you got to show that you got the guys that can potentially do that down the road.
Before we started, Mark, we sort of ran through the idea of what are a couple, not predictions, but just things you will be looking for in this game. Maybe whether it's a couple players, whether it's a couple areas. Like Jason mentioned before we started rolling, like I said at the beginning, we've exhausted every position group on this roster. I sincerely hope all of our listeners have a really good grasp of every position group, because boy, we've run through it a lot throughout preseason camp. But now that we're actually getting live game action, TJ Finley will be throwing against another team, all that kind of stuff. What are two areas, two guys, whatever, a couple groups, a couple areas for this game that you will be keeping an eye on, and maybe trends that you think could occur in this game?
Oh, I'll talk about a couple players I'm curious to see. And they're both in the middle of the action out there. Jason Jones, the transfer from Oregon, originally from Calera High School, huge nose guard, nose tackle, whatever you want to call him. And, talked to Jimmy Brumbaugh about him, and he said he had potential when he was out at Oregon, because Brumbaugh was on the staff out there, but he said he just didn't really put it together. He said he's played much better since he's gotten to Auburn, and I think he's committed himself to be a better player. And his teammates think he's going to be a real plus to the defensive front this year. So I'm going to be watching him carefully to see how he does in his opening game, his first college start. And then on the other side, Tate Johnson making his first college start. Is he big enough? Is he physical enough? Is he confident enough to play that center position? Does he snap the ball well? I think that's certainly two things to watch. There's a bunch of other ones I'm interested in seeing too, but those two really stand out. I want to throw my 2 cents in on the opponent conversation. I thought Akron was pretty sorry last year, and they were, even by bad MAC team standards, they were really bad. And I think Mercer will be much more athletic than Akron was. Probably not nearly as big, but much more athletic and probably better coached. And I'm sure, Mercer could probably beat last year's Alabama State team by 3 or 4 touchdowns. So it's a little bit of a different animal, but still a team Auburn should beat if it plays well and should win by multiple touchdowns.
Yeah, like we talked about with Finley, it doesn't really matter who he's going up against. It's just wanting to see that offense run crisply, wanting to see him, make the connection with receivers, whether it's against Mercer, whether it's on air, against nobody. Fans want to see that. Same thing for Tate Johnson. It doesn't matter who he's going against. You want to see them. You don't want to see a lot of mistakes between the center and the quarterback. I mean, Philip just talked about a snap that went the wrong way. I mean, you don't want to see that with a new guy that's coming in at center.
Yeah,
So
Nick Brahms has played 40 games for Auburn. Tate Johnson has played in one, I believe.
no.
That's
11 total snaps. Yeah, and a good-looking player, and somebody that like we've been interested to see on the field, but you absolutely cannot replace, at least immediately. You can't replace what Nick Brahms brought. Philip, what do you? We're so close now. I feel like people are just they're sort of tired of hearing about all the different aspects of things we've been talking about all offseason, or at least that's been the vibe I've gotten from people on our board and just people I've been talking to. It's like, all right, let's get this thing finally kicked off. When things finally get kicked off on Saturday, what are you most intrigued to see? What are a couple things that you're really going to have your eye on, from coaching, from players, from positions, whatever?
Well, I think that one thing I'm interested in seeing is how different the defense looks with Owen Papo at full speed. That's something they obviously missed terribly bad last season. It was unfortunate that he couldn't play the second half or so of the season and wasn't really full speed when he did play. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that. And it's the offensive line. Brandon Council, his first year, was clearly Auburn's best offensive lineman before he hurt his knee, and he hasn't seemed to play. And I'm hesitant to say how an offensive lineman played or not, because it's just hard to tell, and whether it was somebody else's mistake or he went the wrong way or what. But I'm curious to see if he can get back to that level, which he does not seem to have been at since then. That's one thing. And the other thing is it is obviously Finley. I mean, that's everybody wants to see what's going to happen with him. And I think he'll be fine as long as he doesn't go out there and throw a bunch of interceptions. When you talk to coaches about execution, they'll tell you that being crisp on execution is a lot better when all your guys are better than all their guys. So I don't think executing against Mercer definitely means that you'll execute against LSU or Georgia or whoever, but it'll certainly be a step in the right direction. And this offense and defense, with two new coordinators, two new play callers, they need to get comfortable with that. So it'll be a game, and it'll be something to watch, which is something we haven't had, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just excited for all day Saturday to be able to. I mean, week 0 was a nice little appetizer, and we got Vandy in there, which, hey, Vandy is the number 1 scoring offense in the FBS right now, by the way. Lock it down, put it in.
They may stay there after week 2. Or
oh yeah, they might. The team they're playing this Saturday may be worse than that one.
Yeah, it's right there. I'm excited. I'm excited for Thursday night. There's some Auburn flavor on a Thursday night with Penn State's playing at Purdue. Aiden O'Connell's a really good quarterback for Purdue. Penn State is 11-11 its last 22 games under James Franklin. They've added some transfers, but it's a big game for them. Missouri's playing. I mean, there's some things to watch. Tennessee's playing. I'm sure that'll be a wild atmosphere, and they'll probably score 700 points, in their first game. So backyard brawl is back on Thursday night. There's a good kickoff to we got a long weekend of football all the way to Monday night.
San Jose State, Jason, is playing Thursday as well. So Auburn's next 2 opponents, you can watch them on Thursday, and you don't got to worry about them getting in the way of your. You can watch Auburn's next 3 opponents between the next 3 days. Of course,
Yes.
Mercer on Saturday, and then
Yep,
Penn State
that's
on
it.
Thursday. Jason, I guess just your 2 cents, your 2 areas that you'll be paying attention to.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious up the middle. When you look at Tate Johnson, TJ Finley, just even just little things, just the snaps when they're in shotgun. They're in the right place, the timing of the offense, the timing of the offensive line. That whole offense, you're in the second year of essentially the same system. So that should be beneficial, especially for a guy like TJ Finley. But just, how's that offensive line? I really want to see, if Austin Troxell, he looks physically like he's a guy that should have looked before all these injuries. He's been able to work out and build on a season for the first time. I'm looking forward to seeing if him and Killigan Zaire can be road grader type offensive tackles. I think they can protect. Can they open up and get downhill in the running game? Can the offensive line in general, can they get to the second level? That's what they've been working on. Last year, they were fine at the point of attack. But the point of attack means you got a 4-yard run. They need, you got Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter, Damari Austin. They need 40-yard runs. They've got to get to second level, get to those guys in the secondary. So I want to see if those guys are more active on the front on the offensive line. And then, Mark mentioned Jason Jones. I want to, even if it's just Mercer and they got a long way. It's a long way from Penn State and LSU and obviously Georgia and Alabama. But I want to see, Morris Joseph. We've heard about him, but Jeffrey Imba. Some of these other guys, Dylan Brooks. I want to see, because these are guys they're going to have to depend on this season. I want to see what those guys look like in a game and maybe playing 4 or 5 snaps in a row with the energy of the crowd and kind of being out there. That's going to be big for me. So I guess mine's a little bit line of scrimmage based too for what I want to see from this team.
Yeah, I'm with Mark about the defensive line possibly having a lot of success. Jason, I didn't realize how small the Mercer O-line was. Colby might kill someone. I mean, he's the talent.
Marcus Harris is probably the strongest guy of the bunch. And
yeah.
He's built like a fire hydrant that weighs 300 pounds. And my guess is that there's going to be some guys on roller skates on the Mercer offensive line come Saturday night. Yeah.
And it was funny today. We were talking to Jalen Simpson and he paused mid-answer. And he was like, I just want y'all to know I love the D-line.
I love my D-line.
He was like, I love the defensive line.
He knows where the bread's buttered.
Yeah.
Those guys have to get pressure for those secondary guys to look good.
Yeah. And Jalen was great today. A lot of he was funny, but there was a lot of insight going on too in between his answers, talking about how, because we've said throughout the preseason, look, secondary is pretty solid. D-line is probably the best group. And he was like, look, we're not good without them. And they've got to rely on us too. I forget the phrasing he used, but pressure, I think he said pressure and coverage or something like that.
Yes, that's it. They go hand in hand. And we talked about it. It's so vital in today's game to be able to pressure the quarterback, but create negative plays and just, even if you don't have to sack guys, but you got to get pressure and you got to get after them. And so it's a big deal. But you're right, Jalen and Nehemiah Pritchett, Donovan Kaufman, those guys back there, Zion Puckett, they got some veterans on this defense, and I would expect those guys to go out there and play like a group of veterans.
I'm gonna do it as soon as we're recording this on Wednesday night. I'm gonna upload all the player interviews on our YouTube channel after we're done. There's been a lot of good ones this preseason. This has been a really good preseason for interview. I've seen Chapman, Colby Wooden, even Jason Jones today in kind of the way that he was sort of blunt about things. But y'all go watch on the Auburn 247 YouTube channel. I'll post the full interview with Jalen Simpson. Every other answer was pretty entertaining. He called Jason our Jason. He called our Jason goofy at the very beginning. So that was good. And then he talked about his battle rapping career. So all of it was great. Me personally, I to I guess deviate maybe from the stuff we've been talking about a lot. You mentioned Damari Alston, Jason. I'm remembering from my time at Auburn when I was a freshman, I watched Cam Martin go crazy against Alabama A&M. I think he had like $150. I remember they were playing Kent State when I was a senior. I think both Joey Gatewood and Sean Shivers combined for like 300 rushing yards between the two of them. So there's a precedent for a guy further down the running back rotation in a game like this where Auburn wants to really, really lean on that ground game, make things as easy as possible for the quarterback, to, like Mark said, to make some easy completions. How about Damari Alston in this game, maybe going for somewhere around 100 yards? I certainly think he there's a good chance he could end up with the most carries in this game. And really, I'm interested to see him. He was kind of one of the quieter additions, I think, just because of once he came on board, the rest of the class sort of settled in. He's a really good player, and we saw on Saturday he took a lot of those first team reps. Really good looking ball carrier. So I'm interested to see him in his first action. And then Jason just mentioned the secondary. I am very interested to see how those pieces fit into place, the ones we don't know. The Keontae Scott train continues to roll on. Mark had some pretty big praise for him earlier in the week on one of our shows. I mean, continually sounds like he's just been that dude throughout the preseason. And then I love Caden Bridges. I have absolutely loved him and his athleticism. He's a guy who's capable of just destroying somebody on a play. So those guys that are like the unknown commodities in the secondary, that's what I'll be interested in seeing. But anyway, guys, so it's the round table. So as is tradition, we will end here with our score predictions and just, your tweet length prediction for the game. So we'll start with Mark. Mark, does Auburn handle business, and how so on Saturday?
Yeah, I think the score I predicted was 37-14 or 13, something like that. And I think it could certainly be bigger than that. But I think Mercer's going to put up a good fight and keep it interesting for a while in the first half.
All right, Philip. The pressure.
I think I picked. I know I did. I picked 38-13. Auburn win 38-13, mainly because I think that that Mercer is the team that's going to come in here and play hard and not be intimidated. I'm sure it's very helpful to them that they played in Tuscaloosa last year, so and gave a reasonable account of themselves under the circumstances. So I don't look for it to be a game that's in doubt, but I also look for Auburn too. I mean, once the game's in hand, you're probably not going to see Tank Bigsby or a lot of guys. There's no reason to. And so I think Auburn could beat them worse. Obviously, if Mercer turns the ball over, it could get completely out of hand. But I think 38-13. I think Auburn will do what they need to do and then turn it over to the guys that haven't played much.
Jason, what you think?
Yeah, I've got 56-17 because I think they're really going to struggle to move the football in the first half. I think Auburn's going to have a lot of field position. I think this game could be. I think Auburn could score 30 in the first half because I think they're going to be aggressive. I think this is a group that feels like they got something to prove, and even though it's just Mercer, I think that starts on Saturday night, and I think they'll score some second half. That's what they did last year in Tuscaloosa. They scored a couple of touchdowns in the second half, and they'll do some things, but I just really think they're going to struggle to move the football against this Auburn defense. And you give this team a couple of short fields, you get a turnover or two, do some of those things, and it could get out of hand in a hurry. And Nathan, that's why I thought that point was right too, because the more you go to Jarquez Hunter and Damari Alston, Auburn's, second offensive line are guys that have played a lot of football too. You start going to Brendan Coffey and Alec Jackson and some of those guys are grown men.
Cam Stutz, yeah.
Yeah, it's or Keandre Jones, whoever it is. Jaleel Irvin. I mean, those guys, that's the thing about it. They got a bunch of those guys in this wide receiver group. I mean, the second four, there's not a nickel's worth of difference between those guys and the first four. Camden Brown is going to be, that guy, you could be throwing that guy the ball in the fourth quarter of this game. And so I think there's opportunities for Auburn to go out there and do some things offensively.
Your pick's probably better than mine, Jason.
No, who knows? There's one thing, somebody talked about that today. They're talking about making picks with the spread. I said, but the one thing you do not want to do is listen to, because the more I look at a game, the worse I get. So, it's liable to be 36-27 before it's over with. I hope not for Auburn fans' sakes and their blood pressure on Saturday, but I think they will. I think they'll handle business.
Yeah, I'm with you, Jason, on like the higher higher scoring end of the spectrum there for Auburn. I've got 45-21 Auburn, and the only reason 21 might sound high, I see Mercer. Like I said, I kind of see maybe a little bit of frustrations and just kind of they'll just be bothersome. I think in their passing game occasionally. I think maybe through the first 3 quarters they could get a couple touchdowns, if not a couple at the end of the game against the third team defense. And so, but really, of course, it doesn't really matter. But that's why what I will roll with in our. By the way, if you're listening to this on Thursday morning, our staff picks will make their triumphant return, the Fearless Forecaster. So go check that out. On our website, we'll have picks for this game. We'll have picks in a couple sentences on the game of the week, which it could be Notre Dame, Ohio State. We could have gone with that, but Oregon, Georgia kind of has the sense of maybe being a little more competitive, and then other notable games throughout the week. Jason had the idea before the show, or maybe I had it. I don't know. It's all rolling together at this point. To kind of go through our game of the week and give a couple thoughts on that, guys. I think we should just give a couple thoughts on the rest of the schedule and just kind of maybe some games you'll be, like Jason said, on for the Thursday night games. Just a couple games that you'll be looking out for, and just thoughts on Saturday in general, whether it's in the SEC or elsewhere. Jason, I guess I'll start with you. We've talked a little bit this week about that Oregon Georgia game because a guy like Bo Nix, he knows Georgia. Dan Lanning knows Georgia.
I think that one's a given for everybody. I think everybody wants to see that one for lots of different reasons. That one's one that you want to pay attention to. I think Florida State LSU, just because I just absolutely have no idea what to expect from LSU. Florida State's played a game. What does LSU do? Cincinnati, Arkansas. I mean, it's a pretty good first weekend. So there's a few games that I like to kind of pay attention to this weekend. That's a couple of mine.
Mark, what about you? Where were you
going against the grain? I picked Cincinnati to go into Fayetteville and win, and I understand a lot of Cincinnati's talent is in the NFL right now, but I think they're well coached, and I think Arkansas lost a lot of talent too. So I think the expectations are higher for Arkansas than they probably should be. So maybe I'm wrong on that, but I don't think Fayetteville is the most intimidating place in the world to go in and try to win as a road team. So I think Cincinnati could make that very interesting. And both teams are ranked, but Arkansas is definitely the favorite.
Philip, it works out pretty nicely because the Oregon-Georgia game comes on at 2:30, so we'll just be able to cruise through that one until Auburn kicks off, and then Notre Dame, Ohio State is unfortunately the nightcap. Seems like those will be the two best ones.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that Georgia-Oregon game as well. Obviously, I think that I'm sure Kirby is not thrilled about the way it happened to turn out, which is his defensive coordinators on the other side of the field, and the quarterback, who's already played against him 3 times, is on the other side of the field. And Oregon's got a lot of good players. I think if Georgia and Oregon were playing in the middle of the season, I'd probably pick Georgia. But Georgia's only got 3 starters back on defense, and I'm just not somebody who says, well, they got a bunch of 5-stars, so they're going to be great. They're not 5-stars to me until they're 5-star players. So, and plus they just haven't played together that much. And I think that's at the same time, it's first game under a new coach for Oregon on the other side of the country. So I think Georgia will win, but I think it's going to be a close game. Jason mentioned LSU and Florida State. I'm interested in that too. I don't really have any reason to believe either one of them's any good, but it's a really strange start to the season when you look at it. Florida's playing Utah. Auburn's playing Mercer, of course. LSU's playing Florida State. All 3 of those teams are coming off losing records. I'm pretty sure that's probably never happened, not in modern times, that Auburn, LSU, and Florida had losing records in the same season.
It'd have to go back to, I don't know, maybe some point in the 70s. I don't know if there was any time even then.
Before between Mike Archer and Saban, LSU had a bunch of losing seasons. So I think there was probably some when there were two of them, but I looked and what I saw, I didn't see three. But that'll be interesting. I'm not a Cincinnati believer. I'll be honest. I'll be surprised if Arkansas doesn't beat them. I just, but there's a lot of good games. I'm looking forward to Purdue and Penn State. That's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, get
And,
another game. It will be a good one.
As far as Notre Dame and Ohio State, I still can't. I'm still puzzled with why Notre Dame's ranked in the top 5, but I don't think that'll be much of a game myself.
You know, a conference that really needs to have some good things happen this week is the Pac-12. So if Utah goes down to the swamp and gets beaten by Florida, which I agree with you guys, Florida is a very suspect team. That's not good for the Pac-12. And if Oregon gets run out by Georgia down in Atlanta, that's going to be bad for that league. So, yeah, that's certainly two very interesting cross-country games week 1.
Yeah, they need Oregon to show up and play well. They need Utah to win. Going down there and playing well and losing, that's not going to do them any good. It would be a death blow to the league if
Utah. I don't doubt that Utah has a really good team, but I do doubt that they've ever experienced an atmosphere like they're going to experience Saturday. And there'll be a lot of excitement with a new coach. And
Oregon's a tough place to play, and I've never been there. But they say it's loud, all these things, and Utah was much better with the quarterback in place last year. Lost some close games early until he kind of settled in as a starter. But you just don't know. You're right. We're talking about Auburn. Auburn's in year 2, question marks. But Florida, LSU, Ole Miss, there's Missouri. There's so many question marks and teams. It could be wildly different in how these things turn. South Carolina. It's all over the league. And at least we get a first chance to see maybe a few of these questions get answered.
Yeah, the Utah and Florida was one I definitely had circled. I think it was the Athletics Utah writer said this week that this is the biggest season opener for that program ever. And it's not because Florida is expected to be particularly good, but it's because of all the reasons you guys just talked about. That
the pressure's on.
The pressure is on.
You got pressure on to win at Florida.
Yep.
Yeah, Utah probably practiced at 20 to 25% humidity before they hit the road to Gainesville. It's going to be about 98% humidity in the swamp. The air is not going to be moving down there. So that stadium is like built down into the ground anyway. So that's certainly going to be a big home field advantage for the Gators.
I mean, like Jason said, again, I'm sure Oregon is very loud. Florida in 2019 is the loudest stadium I've ever been to. And I haven't been covering football that long, but when they hit that big run to beat Auburn at the end of the game, I thought I was about to go deaf. So that place can definitely get crazy.
I'll just say this, having been on the field at all these places, it doesn't get any louder than that. It gets to a point where you're like, it's just loud, and that's what it is. Florida is one of those places where it just gets loud, and that's it. It can get louder, but you don't know it because you can't hear anything anyway. And so, I think.
Yeah, I think that's true at Florida, Auburn, LSU, Georgia.
Florida, Auburn, LSU. Correct.
Each place has got a big stadium. After a while, once you can't hear, it doesn't matter anymore.
That's it. You just get to a point, and Florida gets to that point, and when they're good. And when it's rolling, those big high concrete walls in that stadium, it gets loud. And if it gets there Saturday night and they get some momentum, then it could be rough for Utah.
Yeah, Utah's finished out last season real physical, which is something that'll serve you well in the Pac-12. And like Jason mentioned, Cam Rising, kind of a dark horse Heisman guy, really came on for them. But on the other side, AR-15, Anthony Richardson for Florida, in terms of ceiling of quarterbacks in the SEC, has a pretty high one. So
the athleticism. I mean, Oregon is in a very aggressive defense, and you're playing a guy that can take off and run. That's the danger zone because you would think against team like Utah, you think they'd want to, playing that guy, you want to keep him in the pocket and make him beat you, but they want to get after guys, and that could be bad if he escapes some of those. There won't be anybody there, and so it is a very, very interesting matchup.
Yeah, if Oregon loses and Utah loses,
over.
That'll just be that much. That just another slap for the Pac-12 says you don't belong. It's because that's two. Georgia's replacing so many players. Florida, it's what was they 4-8 or 5-7 last year, whichever one they were. Got a new coach. I mean, if your best team goes down there and gets beat, then
it'll all be on USC's shoulders.
Yep.
All USC. That'll be the last hope for them.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that was my other sort of note about this first week. It's an unfortunate thing. Unfortunately, the three out of the four powerhouses that have new coaches. Now LSU is getting a nice first test against FSU. But the other ones that I'm really interested to see how these coaching regimes pan out. They ain't playing nobody. USC plays Rice. Miami plays Bethune-Cookman, and let's see who Oklahoma plays. Oklahoma plays UTEP, and so these, this was one of the craziest offseason. Notre Dame plays Ohio State, so that's a new coach at a big place that has an opportunity. But this was a crazy offseason of these like insanely powerful programs getting new coaches, and like for me, USC is going to be such appointment television for me. Like I'm so excited to be watching Pac-12 football at midnight and watch a really exciting team, I think, but we just won't know for a couple weeks.
The question for USC is, how long does it take to know? They open with Rice. They're at Stanford in week 2, and Stanford was terrible. I mean, they were terrible last year. Fresno State in week 3, Oregon State in week 4, Arizona State in week 5. The Oregon State may be the best team they play the first 5 weeks of the season.
Yep.
Fresno's pretty good too, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be okay, but that should not be a team that USC, and then Washington State in week 6, and they do have the transfer quarterback, but it may be a while before. I mean, USC could be 6-0, be ranked 3rd in the country, and nobody have any idea what kind of team they got.
Here's the problem in the Pac-12 though, Jason. I mean, if they're not playing UCLA and not playing Utah,
USC would play UCLA.
I know, but what I'm saying is, besides those teams,
besides it, that's it.
There's no strong teams to play.
No, Oregon. If you don't match up with them, that's probably that'll be the next best team too. Yeah, no, there's just not many opportunities, and that's the thing. They'll have some.
I guess they play Notre Dame, don't they?
They'll have them late in the season, but it's one of those things that where you look at that league, there's not many opportunities to lose. In this league, if you're in the wrong spot, there's not many opportunities to win, and so
no, I think this league right. I don't know that I've ever seen it. I mean, outside of Vanderbilt, we think there are 13 teams that are capable of winning most every Saturday, and the same 13 teams, probably except for Alabama and Georgia, are also capable of losing most any Saturday.
Yeah,
it's going to get crazy.
The bottom has come to the middle, and behind the top 2, they've kind of come back to the middle too. It's as deep as it's ever been. It may not be as top heavy as it's ever been in terms of having 4 or 5 teams, but the competition level week in and week out right now is it's as tough as it's ever been in terms of the depth of the league.
I think that's something the new coaches that haven't been in this league sometimes are shocked by, is just how difficult it is every time you go out there, no matter who it is.
Yeah, there's no just walking over. I mean, you used to have those games.
Yeah.
Where you go. I mean, me and Mark talk about this game a lot, and I know we talked about it a couple of years ago too on here. That when in 1988, Reggie Slack's first year as a starter, Auburn played Mississippi State. Mississippi State wasn't terrible, but Coach Dye decided, you know what, we got to get physical, so we're going to run the ball every play, and they basically almost ran the ball every play against Mississippi State and won the game. You can't do those things anymore. And you could do some of that then, but and of course Auburn was a better team and more physical and had more players. That kind of that's like Georgia and Alabama. They can still do some of those things now. The rest of the league, you can't afford to do that anymore.
No, and I still got to see Texas A&M do it before I buy into that deal too.
Correct.
Yeah, that's another one that doesn't. I don't know who they play, but they don't play much anybody.
And
Sam Houston State.
There you go.
Yeah.
So another. That's not a new coach, but that is a highly anticipated team that's projected in the top 7, 6, 7, 8.
Another quarterback battle. That's the thing. There's so many teams that Ole Miss quarterback battle. LSU had a quarterback battle. Auburn had a quarterback battle.
Because Ole Miss named a starter yet?
Not
No,
yet.
they haven't. Michigan has a quarterback situation
for week 1, and they're playing the other guy in week 2. Ole Miss has
biblical.
not named a starter.
You know who Michigan's playing week 2, don't you?
Hawaii, right?
Hawaii.
Yes, it won't matter.
Probably doesn't matter.
It won't matter.
Well, that's my thing about this Michigan thing is like it's Colorado State who should be better than Hawaii, but they're not great. And then Hawaii, what are you expecting to like? What if they're both good? Then what?
Colorado State has 50 new players. 50.
Yeah, so like I mean, both of them are probably going to be fine.
Yeah, they're not going to learn anything about their quarterbacks in the first 2 games. None. No.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: if you're playing Hawaii, if you're not good, that's the problem.
That's what I said. Unless it's bad, you won't find out anything about that.
That's the thing. You might have well just played J.J. McCarthy as the starter and said, if you're bad, then we know what we have with Cade McNamara. So I don't know.
It's amazing how some of these teams like Colorado State are just trying to start over in the transfer portal.
Because they lose all their best players. It was like Wyoming last week. Wyoming lost, anybody they had that was a decent player transferred out, and they had to basically start over, and they got walloped by Illinois, and that's never a good sign. Of course, Brett Bielema, he's a much better fit at Illinois than he has been in similar to Arkansas early on. But no, a lot of good football, and I'm looking forward to it. It's almost here.
Yeah, it'll be good. That was a great show, guys. I thought that was a lot of fun. If the rest of the roundtables all season are like that, then that'll be a good time. So appreciate everybody for listening today to the first roundtable of the season. Of course, we are very, very excited to get things rolling with Auburn's first game of the year. Again, 6 p.m. Central, ESPN Plus against Mercer. This is not the last podcast episode of the week, though. We will have the pregame show, which will be a quick hit. We'll do those every week with an opposing team reporter. Just a fast, on your way to the stadium, stuck in traffic, whatever you're doing, get to know the other team right before you see them on the field. I figured that'd be the best way to do it. So we're going to have Bryce Kuhn, who is on the 24/7 network, by the way. He covers Georgia Tech, but he also works in Mercer Athletics, so he gets a nice upfront view of that team. So he's going to join us for that episode on Saturday morning. So be sure you guys look out for that. And then, of course, before the week is over, me and Jason will have the instant reaction to what we see on the field against Mercer. So, again, thank you to everybody so much for listening today. If you guys enjoyed the show, please go leave us a 5-star review. It'd be nice to get the reviews rolling before football season. That's when we encounter our most amount of new listeners, people who realize they're getting that Auburn football itch back and they're just looking for stuff to consume. If you guys leave us some reviews, then they'll go find our show. And so we would definitely appreciate that if you guys could take some time to do that on the podcast app of your choice. As always, the bumper music is provided by our good friend Beats by Mordecai. You guys can follow him on Twitter, SoundCloud, and Instagram. And until that next episode on Saturday morning, we will catch you guys later. Everybody have a great rest of the week.